What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here alongside Josh Davis. Welcome to the Wednesday Link Live. And Josh, for the offseason, for middle of February, I thought we wouldn't have such a giant report to go ahead and dive into, which is only a couple of characters on Twitter, and yet it's reverberating throughout Philadelphia Eagle land, I guess, if you want to use that term. First off, how are you doing tonight? You ready to break down this whole Derrick Gunn report?
Yes, I am. I appreciate it. I'm doing well. How's everybody in the chat? Appreciate you guys joining us. If you haven't, make sure to hit the like button as always. But yeah, I'm doing good. Apologies for a little bit of delay. This was not on Thomas, so if anyone wants to blame anyone, it's me. But workout went a little long. Did not expect that. So, but yeah, we are here. So craziness. You and I were texting about this, like whenever it first broke and everything, and naturally, it's like, okay, we're going to talk about it tonight. But it's so strange. It's so weird. Like I don't even know where you want to start with this thing. But it's an odd report to begin with.
Yeah, there's one thing if the report basically said, oh, Nick Sirianni has a little bit of a hot temper and yelled at some players, and that caused some rip inside the locker room. That would make sense. I think if that was the initial report from Derrick Gunn, we'd all go, okay, yeah, makes sense. I guess he's promised Ty Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie that he'll clean up his act, and he's probably, talked to the players and made things right. That's why they retained him. The big Dom side of this is the weird part, Josh. And this is not some random, Craig Carton FS1 morning show report, which we can talk about. That was the big story that was supposed to be today. This is Derrick Gunn. And if there's one reporter, one insider who, I'm not saying he's perfect. I don't think he has, everything right, but he's very plugged in. Like, he knows his stuff. He's best friends with Brandon Graham. This seems really strange to include the fact that Big Dom is kind of like the therapist for Nick Sirianni? He's kind of like the dad of the group, trying to make sure Sirianni doesn't fight with the kids and the players on the sideline. The Big Dom side of this is really, really strange.
It is. And I was trying to wrestle with it myself too, of like, how would we officially term Dom, right? Like, what is his title? Could you go as far as saying he's babysitting Nick Sirianni? Like, in a way, because
literally
it's
it
kind
sounds
of like,
it.
okay, well, like, whoa, he's a little bit emotional here. And that, it's fine to a certain extent of, hey, get emotional on the sideline. But like, you're right on with it being D-Gun. Because if it was somebody else, then I'd be going,
anybody else.
Okay, you could name a bunch of different people. And I'd go, well, whatever. It's like, is it that big of a deal? But D-Gun, he's not like is sensational enough to be like, oh, Dom is not, taking care of Sierra. Like, he's being told by a source that he believes well enough to say, no, this was actually a significant enough factor for me to report it as news, that like Sirianni is somehow being held back. It's still really strange. Like, I can't grasp it. I can't put my mind around it. But again, the fact that it's D-Gun saying it, it's like, well, I don't know. It's a little bit strange, or it's weirder or odder that it's not a different reporter or something like that. So I don't know. It's crazy. It is like we see, several comments. Tracy N says it's officially rumor season. I mean, that's
it is.
naturally, what starts happening. People leak things and we need stuff to talk about. But it is just a little bit odd. Again, going back to, like you mentioned, Craig Carton, like there's a difference between you get a report like that or a rumor started on that instance and no one really bats an eye. Like we joke about it, we laugh about it, we talk about it, because again, it's rumor season and what else are we going to do? But like, in all seriousness, no, very few, maybe a couple, but very few people looked at that, heard that report and went, oh, maybe there's something there. Maybe that's legit, but like if D-Gun says it here, it's a little different. So I don't know. By the way, you're getting a lot of comments on the stash too. So I was going to mention it. It's not the main topic, but I guess Paige is letting you keep it for a little bit longer.
Hey, listen, Paige is not a fan, but I said if we get to 43,000 subs today, then we got to keep it. And we did. So it's going to stay for a little while longer. Drop a like for the stash. Paige is watching right now. So be sure to tell me how much you like it, because she'll read the comments. This comment right here is fascinating. I think this is early comment of the night. Corey says they're saying everything besides plays and play calling sucked. That's very interesting because it's very true. I mean, how much have we actually heard about, the play calling was the real problem inside Philadelphia? We haven't heard any of that. It's been all, locker room turmoil and the relationship between players and coaches, and now Nick Sirianni yelling at players and needing Big Dom to babysit him. Everything but, as Corey pointed out, listen, there's one main problem that we all saw this past season, and that was play calling. Play calling was a massive issue, and it's one thing to just, be casual fans. We did this every week. Like, the casual fan can see the issues, but you can find a number of highly credible, all 22 YouTube accounts that broke down the Eagles offense. A famous one that called the Eagles offense, a high school offense. And you can watch their breakdowns and go, there are serious flaws here. And yet, again, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Big Dom being the issue. And what's worse about this whole thing, Josh, is the timeline basically checks out. I mean, literally, the Eagles were great until they played the 49ers, which Lane Johnson said during Super Bowl week that it was the 49ers that kind of broke Philadelphia, but it was also the 49ers game where Big Dom had the altercation with Dre Greenlaw. He gets ejected and then suspended and fined for the remainder of the season, and the Eagles were terrible ever since. Now, he was back on the sideline for the wild card game, and they still lost that game, so I don't know if it fully checks out here. It is very, very interesting, and I'm fascinated to see what the really fallout of this report is, because somebody's going to speak on this, right? And you got to remember, next week is the NFL Combine. Howie Roseman will for sure be in front of a microphone at some point. There's a good chance Nick Sirianni will be as well. They're both going to be there. This is going to be brought up, and the reaction to it by the guy himself and Sirianni, or his boss, technically, maybe in Howie Roseman, is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And like we say, not that we necessarily wanted any type of reports like this, but it's a very dull time of year usually, and then all of a sudden you have things like this. So it's at least something to talk about. But yeah, it's incredibly unusual, because I'm with you. I thought we would be more of a conversation of it's the play calling, it's the analytics of the team, and there's certainly that. I mean, there's the Jalen Hurts report of first look or first option passes being down from last season or 2 seasons ago or whatever. So there's all sorts of things that we're going to look at, but yeah, like the bigger one is I don't know, and even there was hate, or depending on where you're at, there was hate, there was dislike, there was maybe not feeling great about Sirianni to begin with, but then this comes out, and I saw a couple different polls around Twitter of, hey, did this change your mindset or your viewpoint of Sirianni? And it's gotten worse, because people are you serious? Like, we got to have a guy here that is, I mean, literally on the sideline, your babysitter, your parent, your whatever you want to call him, to keep him under wraps. I still can't like 100% get behind that. Surely it's not. It's maybe an overblown comment, or whoever his source is kind of being serious, but kind of not. Like, look, hey, Sirianni lets his emotions get out of control too many times, and maybe he needs to rein that in. But still, it's just, for a head coach of all people, you think maybe they could keep that under wraps, but ultimately, I mean, we can still get past this. Ultimately, that in my mind is not the reason that the Eagles lost. I'm sorry that it's maybe adding or contributing to just the morale or the vibes in the locker room were not great, but X's and O's are what cost them. It was the play calling, it was the execution. We saw it a number of times week after week. So I don't know. I mean, I think the big part has been fixed. You got the coordinators, you got Kellen Moore, you got Vic Fangio, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, because you have a lot of guys, at least internal, players in the locker room, who were standing up for Sirianni. Now, seemed like more of those that were being vocal were the veterans, and some of them are probably not going to be. Like, if Jason Kelsey is not here, if Fletcher Cox is not here, they were very vocal of supporting Sirianni. So I don't know. It's hard to say. There weren't as many of the, I mean, not I guess younger guys, but second, third year guys that just vocally came out and said they didn't say they disliked Sirianni, but they also didn't come out and voice the support as much. So it's an interesting place to be in, that's for sure.
It feels like this report should have come out right before the end of the season, because they could have dumped this report, clearly leaked it internally, and then fired Nick Sirianni, and we all would have gone, I mean, geez, look at this. I mean, got to get rid of Nick Sirianni now. Then they fire him, then they bring in somebody new, and we have moved on with our lives. The thing that we got to keep remembering is there were some very high-profile coaches that joined Nick Sirianni's staff. Like, if it was well known within the National Football League that Sirianni has serious sideline issues, and again, you can read this and you can go, okay, maybe it's serious, or maybe, like you said, a little bit out of context, and saying, yeah, he's a little chippy, and Big Dom kind of calms him down. That's why we love Big Dom. He's great. Like, it could have been that sort of context. But if Sirianni actually had some sort of serious sideline, what do you want to call anger management? Like, he really ripped into players in a league that you can't do that because they're grown adults making millions of dollars versus college. Kellen Moore wouldn't have come here. I mean, Vic Fangio would not have come here. If they knew that this was a thing, and you think, Dick Sirianni's been a head coach for 3 seasons now, if this was a real problem, it would have gotten out long before this. They would not have hedged their bets on Kellen Moore becoming a head coach, because that's what he wants to do by joining Sirianni's staff. So I don't think it's all hands on deck and, sound the alarms and freak out. Is it a bad look? Yes. Do we need a little bit more details on this? Yes. I'll be curious to see what Derrick Gunn says eventually whenever he speaks on Jacob Media. I don't know when he does, but eventually he will. The bigger report from me, from the same tweet, is the idea that Jalen Hurts' new contract and losing the Super Bowl really weighed on him, and he was pulled in a lot of different directions, causing him to have some poor play. What was your reaction to that part of D-Gun's tweet?
Yeah, that was I mean, I could see it. It's a lot of money. I mean, anybody who has the extra, criticism, the spotlight put on you and everything else, it's I don't know. That one's a lot easier, I guess, to wrap my head around. But in the same sense of, okay, everyone seeing Jalen initially whenever he got the contract. Now it's one thing to say something, and it's another one thing to actually do it. But
Right.
what was his like almost first comment, or maybe first comment that he said was nothing changed but the weather, baby. So it's like that's great. That sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah.
But apparently it did change. Now we saw, the wherever you want to fall, and this is very polarizing, but like, did Jalen Hurts' personality change? The organization, apparently some people, I don't know how many, but apparently some people want him to change his personality from whatever it was this past season. Now, I think that there's a lot contributed to that of a losing streak. Like anyone who's competitive, you, me, anybody is not going to be joking around laughing when we're playing a game to win. Like it's just not as fun. I think everyone could attest to that. So, like I don't care too much that, oh, was Jalen not dancing around, whatever. That doesn't bother me. Now, earlier in the season, you could make a point. Sure. There were moments. Now it was more of struggling and some frustrations like, man, we're winning, but we don't win very easily and it's ugly.
Yeah.
So maybe that had to do with it. But yeah, it is a point to be made of like, okay, did he try to take advantage? And I can't blame him of like, hey, if you have as many opportunities as possible to get a bag and like continue to just pile up, just wealth or, life-changing money and finances and everything else. I mean, you already got that with a contract, but it seemed like, I think you did a short over it, didn't you? The commercials and all the deals that he was getting. So it's like, he was very busy.
A lot.
And so, maybe that played a part into it. There's a team source that even said to John McMullen that Jalen needs to get back to business. I think he realizes that now. So, it's on all different sides here. It's not as surprising to me. But I also would say it's not as alarming. Jalen still feels like and seems like very level-headed, and he probably would understand, hey, you know what? This was a learning experience, a growing experience here. And was it handled perfectly? No, maybe not. But again, I would just love to know who the source is, because if it's not someone close with Jalen, he's already, maybe just not coming off as much or showing that emotion. So perhaps someone looks at him and says from the outside looking in, even though they're in the locker room, if they don't know great, they could just be like, yeah, I think the money maybe changed him a little bit, like he's just not the same type of person, or we didn't handle it right. I don't know. So that's the part I would love to get extra insight of, how good is that source? How close to Jalen is that source?
Well, you got to remember that Jalen Hurts obviously not a part of the NIL, or at least the modern day NIL in college. And so he kind of got his first bag with this brand new contract versus being a second round draft pick. I do think the Super Bowl part of this weighs a little bit more than the contract, because Jalen, his entire career, has been battling a narrative that he wasn't able to make it at Alabama and that Tua overtook him for the national championship. And then even though he, was good at Oklahoma, he never kind of eclipsed that national championship caliber pedigree. Is obviously a second round draft pick and very much a gadget player in the first year behind Carson Wentz. Didn't seem to be coming anytime soon. And then suddenly he's the starter. He gets him to the playoffs. Year 2, he's in the Super Bowl. And had he won that football game, he can really sit back on a throne and go, look what I have done. But having lost that game, I'm sure it did weigh on him in a very, very, very tough way. The problem that we have is we don't know enough about Jalen Hurts' behind-the-scenes life to know if the money really did change him. And that's probably for the better, because I think a lot of these guys don't get the privacy that a lot of them would like. And Jalen Hurts is unique in that he's not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not really, he's on the national stage being a starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. But compared to the guys I just mentioned, very much low key. Like he's not on IG posting about, what Hollywood actress he's going out with, or he's not on Netflix's quarterback, with his wife Brittany. He is very quiet. We have no idea where Jalen Hurts is right now. Like nobody knows where Jalen Hurts is right now. And yet you wonder if cameras were there, or if you had a little more insight into his life, if the money was a little bit more changing. But you mentioned it overall from the beginning. This is going to be something that's not that big of a deal in the end, because this was the season for it to all go downhill. It did in the end after being, 10-1. But he should really be able to refocus, having an extra year under his belt with the bag in the pocket, money in the bank, but also coming off the Super Bowl 2 years removed now. I think now is going to be when Jalen Hurts is going to be just fine. Again, we are literally reading into a 120-character tweet, and we're trying to figure out exactly what it means. Now, it's going to get blown all over the internet, and rightfully so, because it's Derrick Gunn, as we mentioned from the very beginning. But Does this mean the Eagles are a dumpster fire? Does this mean that Nick Sirianni can't coach and has lost a locker room? Does it mean that Jalen Hurts is, a fluke quarterback and going to be the next Carson Wentz? No, it doesn't mean any of that, right? We need to just pump the brakes a little bit. It's just very interesting. And as I said about 5 minutes ago, you're going to get both Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman in front of media at the NFL Combine next week, and this will be question number one. Trust me, they're not going to ask about draft prospects until they ask the question that we've just been talking about for the past 20 minutes.
Yep, and it'll be fascinating to see what the answer is or what the excuse. They're prepped, obviously, so they'll have a good bit of time to read into this, see what's going on, what are they going to say, how are they going to respond to it. It's just a very unusual report because you don't really see this from hardly any, if any, coaches on that instance. So, again, I would have expected it to be from some other reason of, the play calling or other things that we talked about. But here you go. It's always something with this group. I mean, ever since we've started, you've been doing it for a long time, but since we started this Wednesday link, just about, because it's basically the 1 year mark. It's been every single show almost, and just the drama. Now, it was good stuff for a little while. Naturally, after the Super Bowl was not great, but leading up to the draft, we're like, we're gonna get Bijan, and then it's okay, Jalen Carter's even better. This is fantastic. But it's just been almost every single time. So I don't know. At this point, there is an element to it of kind of being used to just crazy, shocking, ridiculous news that comes out. But still, I'm with you in saying, like, I can't wait because there's no clue. There's no clue where this thing goes. Not anybody who has their security guy that gets thrown out of a game and gets ejected, another player. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, he's suspended for several games. And it turns out to be maybe a much bigger deal than what we initially thought. Like, he's an emotional support. Sure, everyone loves Big Dom, rally around him. But I kind of thought it was a semi-joke. I'm not knocking Dom. I know he does stuff for the team and it's very important. It's vital. But I'm just saying, like, you don't go into the game and say, oh gosh, we're going to lose because we don't have Big Dom on the sideline.
Right.
But I don't know. That's what they lead you to believe now. It's crazy.
I do think that this is queuing us up for Philadelphia to do a big PR shift. The Philadelphia organization, the front office, has got to do something to get Nick Sirianni out of the news, because every time Nick Sirianni's been in the news since they officially, they never officially said they weren't going to fire him, but since he came back after the debacle in the final 7 games of the season and the loss to Tampa Bay, it's been all about negative Nick Sirianni, and now, again, this is the worst look yet. This is a bad report, and again, coming from a very trusted insider in Derrick Gunn. They're going to need to go out during the NFL Combine and change the narrative. They're going to need to go out, and whether that's, re-signing Hassan Reddick or claiming that they're going to, whether that's the start of the new league year on March 11th and making a big-time splash. We can talk about, cornerbacks and L'Jarius Sneed, safeties, whatever you want to do. They need to shift the narrative back, because if you remember what happened last year, they lose the Super Bowl, right? Okay, we lose the Super Bowl, bad PR. Give us some good PR. We start the new league year thinking Philadelphia is in very big cap trouble. They're going to lose all their key players. And very quickly, even though the moves didn't turn out to be the correct ones because they didn't work, they re-signed James Bradberry, they re-signed Darius Slay, and we all went, wow, look what Howie did. A Howie masterpiece. Here comes DeAndre Swift and Jalen Carter during the NFL draft. And we went, oh, Super Bowl, forget about it last year. We're going to it this year. And the PR shifted for the positive, and it was very positive until it all unraveled. They need a positive PR move, and whether this is going to, be the tipping point that makes them go sign a big-name player, no, I'm not saying that, but I wouldn't be surprised if the way to get the Eagles in positive light right now is to do something that the fan base would be excited about, which is bring back Kelsey or bring back Cox or re-sign, Hassan Reddick, or go, make a big-ticket splash like L'Jarius Sneed.
Yes. Yep. I'm totally with you. And by the way, shameless plug here, because you mentioned it with the draft, but a lot of people know, but in case you don't, and you're just, swinging by here, we're going to have the draft coverage. We're going to be there live. Not there, I should say. We'll be here.
I was going to say, we are?
With the draft. We'll be streaming it. So it'll be fun. Some new things as opposed to last year. It'll be better, bigger, better. But we're going to be giving away stuff. It'll be a blast. So
very fun.
But no, I'm totally with you. It's, I'm curious to know your thoughts too, because you brought up several different points, I guess. But in terms of it feels like Hassan Reddick needs to come back for a couple different reasons. And you did a good show of the breakdown on the lessening of value, what that might look like if you're a team that maybe wants a different pass rusher. So if people didn't check it out, go watch Thomas's video there. But you made a great point. Does it seem like, is there a way that this would transition towards like, hey, you got to keep Hassan Reddick for a couple reasons, but we're talking about locker room morale, everything like that. I mean, Hassan's going to be one of your guys, especially if Fletch isn't coming back and you're losing some other vets there. I mean, he's the guy. Do you see that happening though, or?
Yeah. You made a good point. I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. Like, you made a good point on my show that I broke down a couple of days ago, that if you're a team and you want a pass rusher and you're willing to spend $25 million a year, why would you trade a second-round draft pick? That was the mock to Tennessee that PFF put out there. So second, third for Reddick, who's hoping to be over the age of 30. Pay him $25 million, lose a second-round draft pick when you could go to a long list of free agent pass rushers who are younger and much, much cheaper. I know that the Carolina Panthers are saying they're going to, tag Brian Burns, but it's not just Brian Burns. There's a whole list of young pass rushers who are going to command $20 to $25 million a year who have a proven track record similar, maybe not as good, but similar to Hassan Reddick. But right now, Philadelphia has to look deep inside their own, right now, defensive line, outside linebacker depth chart and go, what happens if we do lose Hassan Reddick? Because I've been a very strong critic of Hassan Reddick this season because I felt like he disappeared for large swaths of the season despite having double-digit sacks. But if you were to take Hassan Reddick off Philadelphia just this past year, it's a very bad defense that gets extremely worse because they could not rush the passer to save their lives when he wasn't on the football field. Nobody could, except for maybe Jalen Carter early on. You think the Ram game was a little bit of a breakout game for him. But other than that, Jordan Davis was very much irrelevant. Fletcher Cox was very quiet. Josh Sweat was extremely quiet for long stretches. And your guy Nolan Smith just seemed overwhelmed. I mean, he needed a redshirt year, and he got it. And he'll hopefully be better in year 2. And so at this point, being such a big fan favorite, if they trade Hassan Reddick and they can't replace him with any sort of decent, Chase Young's name was thrown out there today, any sort of big-time name, and they just go to the draft, it's going to be a pretty bad look. And there's an interesting article, I'm going to talk about the show tomorrow. I think Fangio's big time into linebackers, and there's this narrative shift. There's some sort of report coming out that they're really going to focus on linebackers, so maybe they become more of a linebacker secondary heavy team versus a defensive line team. Be a big shift for Howie Roseman. I don't think he does that, but I think that bringing back Hassan Reddick at the moment would be a good way to kind of shift the narrative. But I'll be honest, $25 million a year for a guy who's going to be 30 is a really hard pill to swallow. And listen, the argument is Thomas. He's had double-digit sacks like every season he's been in the league. Great. Is he going to do that until the day he retires? No. At some point, I know you're right. Right? Yeah. It's got to come down. So you're going to give him a 3-year, $25 million a year deal and pray 3 years from now he's giving you double-digit sacks? Because anything less than 10 sacks a season at $25 million a year is a really bad deal. A really bad deal.
Yeah, it is. You're right. I think that you have to for a couple reasons, because you mentioned it there. If you go to the draft without him, and if you don't have, if he doesn't come here, it feels like you're very, very likely going to have Andrew Van Ginkel. If you were to name
very likely
who is my most favorite, what percentage I'm going to put on it, likely to get a free agent this year, Andrew Van Ginkel is number one. Like that just feels like the most realistic. The ties to Fangio, number of reasons that we can throw out there. If Reddick is gone, it's 99.9%. I will be shocked if Van Ginkel does not come to Philly. Now, if Hassan is still here, if you keep him, maybe not, possibly, because, you're trying to look at pass rushers and do you bring him in? How much does it cost to have a rotational? But I'm just saying, if you're in that situation of, your best pass rusher, if it's not, if Hassan is gone, and let's say that you do have Van Ginkel, he's not bad, but it's Josh Sweat is your best. And now you could say Jalen Carter, but I'm just saying from edge rushing,
right.
Josh Sweat, Van Ginkel, that doesn't scare me. That's kind of like, oh gosh, seriously? And then I love Nolan. I hope that Nolan is great. I'm still very optimistic, but I'm also realist in the fact that there's something with that shoulder that I don't like. And so I'm just saying, if he can't do anything, you got Nolan and BG as your backup options there. You're going to, get more rotational guys, but it's not a great feel of there's your pass rush. That's who you're going to get. So I think you have to. Now, I'm not saying 25, but I like the point that you made of if a team goes out and says, hey, do we want to pay him or could we get a different option? Maybe they look at it and they go with someone else. Then all of a sudden the market is like, it's not exactly 25. You could get in for 22, maybe even if he takes a little bit of a discount. He wants to stay in Philly, but again, everyone says that. How much is he really wanting to? But yeah, if it's 20, it's still a lot.
That's
you
a lot
still
better.
need you still need the 10-ish sacks a year from him, but still you can. I think, feel better about that one and get him back. But I think he makes a difference not only on the field, but like I say, locker room presence, what his mindset can bring for the pass rush and the defense. So for me, I'm like, you got to figure out a way to make this happen.
It is
it's
worth
something
noting, though,
you have to do.
there's this whole argument that a team didn't want to pay for Hassan Reddick, and I get that, but and obviously that's my whole argument, but the counter to that is there are a lot of teams with 70, 80, 90, maybe $100 million in cap space that fan bases
Especially
don't want you to not spend it. And with the cap going up, as you just mentioned there, it's going to go from the Eagles having $19 million to $27 million. It's almost like an $8 million cap bump. Some of these teams, like the Chicago Bears, you draft Caleb Williams, and then you somehow get another receiver with your second first-round draft pick, and then suddenly it's like, we need pass rushers, so then you just, okay, sure, we'll just give you a second-round draft pick, and we'll bring over Hassan Reddick and give him a 3-year deal, and they have a pass rusher, maybe we can do something in the NFC North. Like, there are still teams that are going to have money, and they can definitely, pay for this guy if the market isn't as strong, but we'll obviously have to wait and see. I'm curious if you think that L'Jarius Sneed's name was someone I talked about today, and he's been thrown around a little bit this week because ESPN linked us, and they said, the perfect fit is L'Jarius Sneed. Do you see Sneed being an actual option? I saw an SB Nation article talking about $15 to $19 million a year. He's very much a big ticket item. We've had horrible luck in free agency with cornerbacks because Bradbury was good and then now he's bad. So, Byron Maxwell's name comes up, Nani Asamoah. Would you throw big money at not just Sneed, but corner? Would that be your number one free agent position group that you would try to go ahead and fill?
I've kind of gone back and forth on this, and the more that I keep thinking about it, I'm feeling like no.
Okay.
And Sneed would be great. If I was going to pick, as far as corners, you got Jalen Johnson's kind of the natural, but Sneed is like right up there as the next pick, who you might want on the roster, especially the fit and how he could play. So he would be really good. But the more that I think about it, I'm saying with Fangio's scheme, I'm thinking like spend on linebacker, so you got to get in safety. You got to get the middle of the field solidified. We had way too many. Everyone knows this. If you watched a second of any Eagles game, you know it. But especially if you strive with this throughout the entire season, you definitely felt the pain. But it's like you got to get that figured out, especially with the way that Fangio plays defense. It's the off coverage. Everyone knows it's not going to be super aggressive. Now he'll be better, but still, I think you have to get that type of playmaker on both sides, at both levels, linebacker, safety, spend the money there. I'm very hopeful and high on Kelee Ringo. I think that honestly, if I'm this may be too high, but I really think that you could go in and say he's a legit candidate to be a starter next season. So, now you do need some other options there, and Eli Ricks, possibly Isaiah Rodgers. If he's not rusty, he's great, but that's a huge if. It's a big question because a lot of guys can't return after a season off. Some do, and that's great. But a lot of guys don't, and they're never the same player. If he is, it's icing on the cake. You got a great player that didn't really take too much, and hey, he's here, and it works out for you. But I think the combination of draft a cornerback in the first round, have Kelee Ringo, maybe, I don't know what to make of Slay. Like, he was okay. He was serviceable. He was fine. He was not great, but he's getting older. So, does he have enough to be serviceable again for a season? But that's where I would say Kelee Ringo, sign a free agent possibly. You have a potential also in Isaiah Rodgers, draft a corner in the first round and piece that together. I know that's not fantastic, but in my mind, if I have to choose, I'm saying pay someone with the linebacker position, pay someone with the safety, have the middle of the field figured out, and then you kind of, figure out your corner from there. So
no,
I don't know. What about you?
I don't hate that idea. And as much as I would like L'Jarius Sneed, money is going to be a big-time issue. And if you pay L'Jarius Sneed, then there's no shot at getting any sort of decent safety. You'd have to roll with Hurt Sidney Brown and the Ghost, so they'd probably sign some low-level safety, which doesn't sound very exciting. Yikes. You mentioned the middle of the football field. The reason I thought about Sneed was because Fangio was the defensive coordinator this past offseason when Miami traded for Jalen Ramsey, and it was like, okay, well, maybe he needed another cornerback to go alongside Xavier Howard, the former Baylor guy. You and I know very well from our time there at Baylor, and Fangio
we voted him as defensive player of the year whenever we were covering him. So
yes, we did. Yes, we did. I do think though that your point about linebacker is very true, because you very rarely can draft a linebacker in the first round and he's like a big-time difference maker. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, but you can draft a cornerback in the first round and look at Sauce Gardner, and the guy was incredible. I mean, literally incredible year one. Wide receiver is very similar to that. It's very hard to find a legit game breaker, especially, at 19, 20, 21 in the NFL draft versus 5 in the draft, who's instantly great. And so going and signing somebody like a Patrick Queen and getting that big-time presence in the middle linebacker spot, and hopefully still playing Nakobe Dean, or maybe still playing Zach Cunningham, or playing a combination of the three, it could be a big-time culture-shifting move for Philadelphia for a team that's been, really anemic at linebacker. And we praise TJ Edwards and Kazir White for being really good, but in reality, they're really good based on what the Eagles have had in the past. And that's not a shot against them. I would love TJ Edwards on the Eagles right now. He was very good this past season. But compared to the rest of the linebackers that are elite level in the NFL, they're not. TJ Edwards is a top 15 linebacker. He's not a top 5. If you can go get a top 5 linebacker and really announce to the world that you care about the middle of the football field for the first time in Howie Roseman's entire tenure, it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch to see if it makes a big-time difference. Now, I like your idea of safety. I really want Antoine Winfield, but he's going to be tagged. Be curious to see if there's a way to get a big-time linebacker for a hefty 10 to 15 million, and then a safety for 14 to 18 million dollars, depending on where the safety market currently sits. So I like the idea. Snead, though, to me seems like one of those young guys with Jalen Johnson who, is a guarantee. And I like Ringo as well, but he's not a guarantee. And no first-round corner is, unless you're getting Gardner at 2 or 3, wherever the Jets took him a couple of years back. Yeah. I think Snead and Jalen Johnson are guarantees, and if you have a chance to get them, then you at least kick the bucket. And you're sure that Howie's going to do that because that's just what Howie Roseman does. But getting a linebacker for the first time in almost our entire lifetime since Jeremiah Trotter is very exciting to me. Very exciting.
It would be
very exciting.
Extremely exciting, especially because we just hardly ever see it. So that's what I'm hoping happens. It's just, you mentioned it a while back talking about the cap. It's a little difficult, though, just to kind of fathom, because there's going to be teams that just show up with boatloads of money to free agency and say, I don't care. Like, what do you want? I'm just going to, here you go. Like, you're going to come play for us. Because if you want cash, we're going to pay you. And what you won't have any competing offers that can match us. It's like playing Madden with the settings turned off. They'll accept any offer and you just move forward. So that's the only part where I'm like, a premier level talent, will we be able to compete? If someone says, hey, there might be one player. If Howie goes into it and says, all right, this is my guy, this is who I want, but you're going to have to pay top dollar for that person. And you might even have to hope that they really want to play in Philly rather than, like you said, name your place, Chicago, wherever you want to go to. So that's the only one that, I'm like, I don't know. I'm questioning on it. I don't know. There's the show that I'm going to drop after the live show here is talking about kind of what we were mentioning earlier, though, of the linebackers. And, the recent report would have you believe that possibly it's Fangio, maybe it's Howie, maybe it's a combination, but there's not a belief in the linebackers they have in the room currently. A lot of us would agree with that, but it's just like, okay, does Howie feel that way? Because he hasn't said that in the past. And he's like, hey, there's a lot of belief in Nakobe Dean. Zach Cunningham played well. He's trying to sell it as much as he can. But if that's the case, and I lean more towards maybe it's Fangio, but if Howie's coming on board and saying, all right, you know what? Maybe my philosophy is not pay linebacker, but we got our defensive coordinator. And if I want to make this thing or give it a chance to make this thing work, even though I may not 100% buy that philosophy, he needs a linebacker. He says he needs a linebacker. He says we don't have the athletic linebackers and fast speed, whatever that we need for coverage. So you know what? Screw it. We're going to go out there and we're going to spend. We're going to at least get one linebacker. I hope that's what they do. It's one of those where I still am probably going to have to see it to believe it, but it feels like it's at least transitioning in that way where I won't be like a total shock, but I'll be very surprised. Like whenever we're breaking, I'm already preparing though. We're probably going to have like 2 or 3 or maybe more breaking live shows. So everyone knows. Sure. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn the notifications on, because once free agency hits, we may never sleep. Thomas and I are probably never going to sleep, but we're going to be breaking live as soon as all of a sudden it's like, hey, we got a linebacker. Oh, we got another safety. You did mention safeties too a second ago also, and I was going to mention that as well. Do you have you threw out a couple different ones there? The one that I keep coming, and it's a bigger signing again. So it's like, can you get a big signing linebacker and a safety, or is it pick one or the other type of deal? Xavier McKinney is one to keep an eye on, what the Giants are going to do with him. There's like conflicting reports. I saw one that said they're not going to tag him. The other one that said they're working to, or they're going to tag him. Obviously it's a done deal if they go with the franchise tag, but if they don't, then I mean that's a big name safety, obviously, and there's connections with Jalen. It may not mean as much, because it's different offense and defense, but still you have the connection there with Bama, and a young player who's a stud. I think everybody realizes that, but you're gonna have to pay a ton. I think it's like 17. I think I was looking at 17 million or something on Spot Track is the estimated value there. So it's really pricey. But again, if you're looking at just top, predictions or free agents on that side, that's probably that since Antoine Winfield is tagged already, he's out of the question. Right. Maybe go with Xavier McKinney.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the list, it's a bunch of these young safeties who are going to try to get their first contract. It's a bunch of guys who are 24, like a Cameron Curl, or 27, like a Kyle Duggar, a little bit older. But it's a lot of young safeties, and it feels like you're going to be able to convince one of them to come to Philadelphia, whether it's Julian Blackmon or Jordan Fuller. I don't think you can get C.J. Gardner-Johnson to come back. He seems to have really burned that bridge with the Philadelphia Eagle fans. I think McKinney makes a lot of sense, but I think they have to get one of them because we just mentioned how hard it is to get a first-round linebacker. It's really hard to get a first-round safety, too. Now, we've seen a couple of good ones in recent history. Brian Branch with the Detroit Lions. Obviously, Kyle Hamilton with the Baltimore Ravens. Chances for Philadelphia to fix the safety spot, and they went in other directions, which history will tell if that was the right move. But it's difficult, and so it seems like getting an established guy, that doesn't have to be Malcolm Jenkins or Brian Dawkins. It has to be somebody just better than Kevin Byard was, Sidney Brown was at times, and even Reed Blankenship. You just got to upgrade, right? And that's the thing about the Philadelphia Eagles as a whole. We talk about, the Sirianni Big Dom report and Jalen Hurts' regression and how much cap space do they have. They need all these position groups. They still were 10-1, and they still beat the Super Bowl champs in the Kansas City Chiefs, and they beat, a really good AFC team in the Buffalo Bills, and they, beat the Dallas Cowboys in one of their head-to-head matchups. Like, they still have a roster that can win, especially on offense. Even if Jason Kelce retires, they should be fine with Tyler Steen at right guard and Cam Jurgens at center. They are built to still win football games. But if they can get 20% better on defense, and 10% of that is skill players and 10% of that is Fangio's scheme, they're probably in at least the divisional round this past year with all the dysfunction, right? They at least beat Tampa, and they're going to play, on the road against the Detroit Lions. One's going to be a really tough game, right? So I think it's important to note that, yes, Philadelphia seems to be in a rough spot right now, but whether it's safety or linebacker, or they get another pass rusher somehow, or they go for cornerback, or they add a wide receiver 3 that we're not expecting them to add. And if they surprise us, they're at least close to being still a good football team, despite what we saw the final 7 weeks of the year, and despite what we have seen today in the report that Big Dom has to babysit Nick Sirianni on the sideline.
Exactly. Yeah. That's. I don't know. Again, I still don't exactly know what that is.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that.
That's where we're at. But you're totally right. Again, it's not like. You can say however you want to, and there's always haters and critics and everything else, and there's some truth to it as well. Was it fortunate on some of the wins?
Sure.
Yes. Were there lucking into it of drops and things like that? Sure, but you still won the games. You were still 10-1, and there's a recipe for success there. Now there's things that need to get cleaned up for sure, but the fact that somehow we crashed and burned to a 10-1 record, it was not pretty. We know that. We saw it for a number of times, but like you said, we were still 10-1. So there's a lot of pieces that are there. You do need to get things figured out, certainly from, like we've been referencing here and all the rumors and everything for the locker room. You have to get that figured out. But you're not going to have coaches, like you mentioned at the open, you're not going to have coaches sign up for this. Like Vic Fangio's not walking into Philly and going like, oh boy, I know what the locker room culture is. I'm hearing this stuff and I want to put up with this. And same thing for Kellen Moore. He had other suitors. There's other people that would have been considering, oh man, hey, you want to get Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator? Nope. Philly snatched him up quick because they knew and they wanted him as an offensive coordinator. So I think it's going to be fine. It'll come down to the play calling. And thankfully, hey, Sirianni was willing to sacrifice or give up a lot of control, it sounds like. And he had the ultimatum with the conversation with Jeffrey Lurie. And it'll be better for that. But yeah, I think ultimately it's going to come down to, I don't know where you're at on this, and it's always like hyperbole, so maybe we shouldn't go there. But each year you could say, oh, it's a big draft, right? It's a big free agency period for Howie Roseman.
Yes,
but it does feel like this one more than last year. Certainly, I don't know what we want to compare it to. Let's not say 5 years ago. But more than last year, this free agency period feels like it is crucial for Howie Roseman because, last season it was still crucial, no lie, and he made some mistakes. Ridge King shout out said it should have signed TJ for a 6.5 year, absolutely,
100%.
but still, there was a lot of other question marks, I think, in all of our minds of saying like, well, hey, I think Brian Johnson's a good signing. I don't know, like who knows?
Yeah.
I think he should work. He should work out fine. And same thing for Sean Desai. I don't know. I'm optimistic. Don't know about him. He had one season. It was okay-ish. Now we know how that turned out. But this season, you don't have that excuse as much. You can say, I got an offensive coordinator who was top 2 in the league in offense for 4 years with Dallas. Like you pile up those. And then you have a defensive coordinator who you wanted a year ago, and JG screwed you, but now you got him. So there's no excuses anymore. Like you got your coordinators. You got to get the personnel in front. So I would say it's got to be up there, but where are you at in terms of pressure on Howie, how much he's got to make this hit, free agency and draft?
Well, he can't have a 2022 NFL draft again. I mean, I just Googled it while you were talking there because I immediately thought of this. He can't have a regular. Obviously, Hurts was good, but did he know Hurts was going to be great? That's up for debate. Davion Taylor, Kayvon Wallace, Driscoll, Hightower, Bradley, Watkins, Tega Winogo. I mean, remember that guy? Casey Toohill. I mean, there are busts all over. I mean, all over this draft.
Oh, my gosh.
And when you look back at the 2023 draft, Carter seems to be a check, but so was Hurts, right, in the end.
Yeah.
Then after that, we're hoping with Steen, and we're hoping, obviously, with Sidney Brown, and we're hoping with Nolan Smith. So he can't have back-to-back really bad drafts. He's got to come out with some players, at least 2. We see this every single year. If you have 9+ draft picks like Philadelphia is going to have, including 2 second-round draft picks, 2 of those players minimum have to be legit starters. Like 2 of those players have got to get legit starting time at some point in the season. You saw it this past year with Jalen Carter, and you saw it with Sidney Brown. He had 2. I mean, literally, he had 2, and that's the minimum that you need.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to go out there and find a way to get 2 people who can make an impact right away, because we've seen it time and time again. You might be able to win free agency in the month of March, but when October rolls around, you look back and you go, did we really win free agency by keeping Bradbury? And did we really win the trade deadline by trading for Kevin Byard? Like, I mean, these things are all, hindsight 2020. So right. I do think this is a critical offseason. I don't think it's as critical as some people like to make it out, like the Eagles must win the Super Bowl this year or else all hell breaks loose. I do think it's critical for Nick Sirianni. But when we go back to the Sirianni stuff we talked about at the top of the hour, the top of the show, I have a very hard time believing that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman knew of a serious internal issue by the players with Nick Sirianni where Big Dom has to babysit, and they still kept him. Now, is part of Derrick Gunn's report true? Surely it is. He's not going to make stuff up, right? He's not going to lie about it. But it can't be as bad as we are thinking it is, because if it's true to the fullest extent, then Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman are blind, and they have ulterior motives, and they don't know how to be a head or be an owner and a GM. And we know that not to be true because they won a Super Bowl in 2017, and they've been very successful, one of the most successful franchises my entire 27 years of life on this earth, right? So there has to be a side of this where we go, it can't be as bad as the report today was, and let's hope that Sirianni is a lot more entrenched with the guys than what came out, and that the ownership is not dumb and overlooking because they just want, a mouthpiece as a head coach, not as a legit leader of men from an NFL standpoint.
Yes, I'm with you. I think it's going to be okay. I think that there's a element of truth to it, like you said, but it's not as crazy or ridiculous as some people may be taking a run with it. It's going to be fine. Like, I mean, even Fitness Warrior here, just the referencing as far as the coordinators, but said, I think Howie will listen to what Fangio says. The same with Kellen Moore.
I think so.
I think they're all bought in of like, again, we've got the coordinators, we've got the system here. We need to get the players and personnel. There's going to be an extra focus on that. I would be curious, too, of how much did that play a factor? Surely it's going to play a factor more so this season, but you had new coordinators, basically. I mean, Brian Johnson and Sean Desai, I mean, I'm sorry, like, no offense, but I can't envision that they had the best idea of, okay, hey, that's the player that I'm going to get. I'm sorry. Right. Like, I know they know their stuff and they're way smarter than me. Everyone knows that. Like, there's no way even debating that. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of have they gone through that process before, that's the first time. That's the first time that they were recording. Well, I guess Desai maybe the second time, but still, it's very new. And so you got players or guys who've done it, been around it for a while. I'm excited. I think that there's a very big possibility. The other part that I totally forgot about, but I just thought about it here as we're just wrapping up talking about the draft. But Christian Parker, he's the DB coach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes even more of a reason why you don't sign a free agent for a corner and just draft a young stud. Because like I know Pat Surtain is different. Like I'm not saying we can draft a Pat Surtain, but still like he's had the 3 years of experience in the NFL of coaching up young rookie corners into all pros and being able to get to that level. So it's not anything new to him, and he's taking them right from college into success. So at 22, like we were talking about, whether it's an Ennis Rakestraw from Missouri, whether it's a Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, Cooper DeJean from Iowa, I mean, you could take your pick. There's so many good corners, and the part to me is like, I don't know that there's any absolute stud corners locked down like he needs to be taken immediately, because all the mock drafts seem to be totally different. Now, again, we're early. We haven't seen combine and all this. So it'll probably change. Yeah. But still, 22 is almost like a really good spot to me. Sure, we'd love to be a little bit higher, but still, it's like the corners in this draft are not as high, it feels like, and you could kind of get any one of them to fall to you at 22. And so that's where I kind of like is, hey, you can pick your poison, and even if Howie wants to move up, say to 15 or something, if Quinyon Mitchell's available, Indy doesn't take him, you trade up like 6 picks or something. There's a lot of different options. But yeah, the more that I think about it as we're just talking about it here, I could see a way where it make a lot of sense to draft your corner, get a little bit more depth there, and then spend in free agency like we were saying for safety and linebacker.
I like that. How about Herbert saying we draft Chop Robinson at 22, Jeremiah Trotter and Cameron Kitchens in the second round. We should be good and get the other pieces in free agency. No one would say no to that. We both would all, I think we both would definitely agree with that for sure. Eagles are a bunch of grown men professionals to say for the reason that them not performing this year is because outside noise and their feelings are hurt is ridiculous. It's true, right? I mean, you get yelled at by a coach and then you're going to go pout the sideline and lose games. That doesn't sound like a professional NFL player at all. Big Dom is a heart attack waiting to happen. Okay, well, I don't know if that's incorrect, but he apparently is the glue that holds the entire Eagle organization together. So we need him back, apparently. Apparently, according, it is to be fascinating.
We love Big Dom. Love Big Dom.
We do love
That's
Big
the
Dom.
disclaimer, but
it is going to be interesting. I don't know when Derrick Gunn talks on Jacob Media. Like I really don't know their schedule, but he's going to have a really big day tomorrow to explain exactly what his tweet was. It was a very vague tweet that didn't give us a lot more than exactly what it said. And so I don't know when he goes live or when he talks about it. I'm sure we'll all cover it tomorrow on our shows, but it could be very interesting to see what he says. Nice mustache, says Marty. Thanks. Tell my fiance that, please. She is not a fan, but she's coming around to it. She's definitely coming around to it.
I don't know if he did. I was just looking it up. I know it's
does he have
normally 11 to 2,
right?
It's normally 11 to 2, but Tone DeShields has been covering for quite a bit.
No idea.
So I don't actually, I don't actually know if he. Surely they'll have him on as a guest at this. You can't drop that knowledge and have.
But why wouldn't he not drop it on a show instead of a tweet? It's interesting. Wouldn't you want to drop it on?
Yeah.
Well, I guess you would tweet it and then you would talk about it on your show because then we watch the show.
True. Right? I don't know very good details on this, but I know that his wife was.
I do know that too.
You're going through some stuff too, so I don't know if he took a step back, but I've noticed he hasn't been on near as many shows recently. So I don't know. Maybe he's like a guest now, or he might be. I would something tomorrow, whether it's a guest or he's actually doing the show. There's got to be, Got to
be. And remember, whoever the source was, I'm not saying it's Brandon Graham, but Derrick Gunn and Brandon Graham are like really close, like they're like buddies. It's not like a reporter-player relationship. It's like buddies. So.
Yeah, BG on Instagram is like sharing and putting stuff to his story from D Gun. So there's a lot of connection there. That's for sure.
JD says, "Give me 2 years running the show. We'll be a dynasty." It would be fun to get to try and be a NFL GM and see what you would do. I think that the money would be a lot crazier in terms of trying to figure out contracts than we would actually believe. Because Howie's like a big time computer nerd, or a big time numbers nerd. So a little harder than it looks.
It would be a lot of fun, but I'm with you. It would be one season of like awesomeness, and then the second year would be like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I screwed it up. The cap is nowhere to be found, and we're going to be destroyed for the next several seasons. So it would be fun. That's no lie.
They make every hire. They are true coaches, and everyone you see is paid to follow orders and cover for them. There's always, there's a whole report or the whole line of thinking in the media business that no news that gets leaked is a surprise. And so the Eagles probably weren't shocked by this. But again, as I mentioned, 30 minutes ago, how they PR manage this is going to be very interesting because NFL teams have PR teams, and whether it's an external PR thing like we just signed this person, or whether it's internally trying to turn the narrative away from Nick Sirianni and get the positive notions and vibes back in Philadelphia, it's going to be interesting to see how they do it, especially with the combine and a lot of eyes and ears being pointed towards Sirianni and what will likely be a press conference from Howie Roseman. He normally does that at the NFL Combine, so we'll see.
Yes.
We'll do a couple more here, and we'll wrap things up. Big Dom, make sure players don't kick Nick Sirianni's ass more so they protect Nick from crazy fans. Maybe. But again, if it was that bad, there's no way that they would have kept him because they fired Doug Peterson. They got rid of Doug Peterson.
Yeah, if the locker room...
Yeah.
If it was broken like that, there's no way. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter what Sirianni goes in with his end-of-season plan to Lurie and, hey, these are the coaches that I want to sign. It would have been, sorry, man. No, you've lost the locker room completely. I will say this, though. I went after Craig Carton on my show today because I thought his report was ridiculous, and it's, very... it's very Craig Carton of him to do it. I don't know if you know the history of him. He's an interesting guy, to say the least. But his report looks better yesterday with D-Gun's thing coming out today. Like, it makes the Eagles look a little more dysfunctional. The problem with Carton's whole thing is that he didn't give us any meat. It was like, the Eagles have a serious problem. I can't tell you what it is, which is really strange because, why not? But there might not be a big-time player there. I'll leave it at that. And you're like, what are we doing here? But then you remember that Carton had took over the, morning show on FS1, and it's not been doing well. It's not a fan favorite if you look at the numbers, which were surprising. Surprisingly not great. So I saw your tweet on that. That was
you got to draw some eyes somehow, right? Come on.
I guess something. Yeah, he's working it. But I'm with you. Yeah, there was lots of comments about what the basically, am I going to sit here and it'd be the equivalent of me and being like, hey, guess what? I know the lottery numbers, but wait till tomorrow and I'm going to let you know what they are. It's like, well, okay, cool. Thanks. Because he can immediately point to as soon as, and to your point, like, okay, now that D-Gun said something, if tomorrow D-Gun goes on and gives more context, then he can immediately be like, that's what I was talking about.
Right.
That's what I was referencing. I couldn't say it yet, but now that it's out there, I could say that's what it is. And it's like, what? Okay, come on, man. Sorry. You're just piling on at this point.
And his whole thing of there could be a big time player not in Philadelphia next year. Who's telling him that and then saying, don't say anything?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And you tell me Craig Carton has the inside scoop to Philly that they're going to trade A.J. Brown or, whatever. Of all people. That's the guy who's got the inside knowledge here. Again, it's February, and it gets wild in Philadelphia, and it's going to be a wild offseason. This is going to be the craziest offseason that we have seen in a very long time. So just buckle up. This is not the start, or this is not the beginning, and it's not the end either. It's going to be a whole bunch in between.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe somebody was part of the fraud scheme, and that's how he's got a connection. But that's
Twisty said Carson has a history of not always being honest. What gave it away, Twisty? What was the indicator that you thought that?
There's so many things to that
something
comment.
There. Oh man. All right. Yeah, Tracy says Carton's accusation about being a player being a problem. D-Gun was pointing at Nick being a problem. They don't exactly back each other up. That's a great point. That is a very good point. Very different. Very, very different.
That's true. But in the locker room feel to it, I guess that's the point that we're saying. But there's still just drama in general. So he can be like, see, I told you there's something there, but that's
if
true.
AJ wanted out though, like let's just for a second live in Craig Carton's world and believe that he's 100% right.
But
again, we're guessing AJ Brown,
Hurts, isn't it?
Or Jalen Hurts.
You did the investigation on the Instagram page.
I guess. Yeah. Do you like that? Yeah. But even if AJ wanted out, we'd know by now. We would know by now for sure, because if AJ was to be traded, it would happen by the NFL draft, and we would start to get rumblings, and we would at least have a denial, right? There would at least be we would never trade AJ Brown like the Titans did before they traded AJ Brown, at least acknowledging the fact that they've heard the rumors, right? That's not out there at all. So, it's a little crazy.
There is.
It's a little crazy.
After he did the Up and Adams show, the Eagles did come out and say that we're not trading him. So, I mean,
that's a good point.
At the Senior Bowl, they got asked, and they said, I think it was was it a scout, or I think it was executive, someone that just said adamantly, like, no, we've seen those. That's ridiculous. The most ridiculous thing ever. We're not trading him. We're not getting rid of him. So there is the denial part to it, but I'm with you of just, you're making money, however, sure. So he's doing the commercials with Smitty. That doesn't mean anything, but still, it's just like, I really struggle to believe that it's AJ being like, nope, I'm done. This thing is it and over. If Carton ends up being correct and there's something there,
he might.
whatever. But
You
still, it's
know.
like, why doesn't he go ahead and just report it? Because it's not like he has a clean history to be like, oh, well, I want to keep my integrity here. Like, you just go ahead and report it. Like, just go ahead and release it because it's going to come out, and then you're going to be last. You're going to be second.
Exactly.
To it. So,
exactly.
I don't know. It's crazy.
We'll see. Fun times. All right, we're going to wrap things up here on a Wednesday link. We're a little later tonight, or we'll be back at our normal time next week. For Josh Davis, I'm Thomas Mott. Get ready for next week. We just say it for the 9th time in a row. The NFL Combine. There are going to be a lot of leaks that come out of the NFL Combine. Dana Rossini said that today, so be ready for that. Sub to both channels. Look out for Josh's show. He's going to drop it a little bit later on tonight as well. Looking forward to that. For Josh Davis, I'm Thomas Mott. Wednesday link. Signing off. See you guys.
Go Birds.